Well, good evening. I'm here not with any fancy quotes, but just a story to tell you that happened to me in the middle of my life when you expect most of your learning experiences are over, at least the really significant ones. But this one was one of the most important lessons that I ever experienced. I'm the youngest of 3 daughters of immigrant parents who fled Eastern Europe because of pogroms and the cruelty of the Russian army. After the Russian Revolution, my parents and their families came to America piecemeal. And in 1921, my mother came as the last remaining child in her family with her mother and 2 siblings. My father came with 1 parent. They both settled in Lower Manhattan, and that's where they grew up. They started a family, met later on in Manhattan, and were married and lived in Brooklyn, which is where my sisters and I were born. They came to America because of severe anti-Semitism, and they wanted to escape the terror and the communistic threat that they faced, and of course, provide us with a life that didn't have a hint of anti-Semitism. The 3 of us grew up in a very warm and loving household, but we weren't very observant. We only went to shul on the required high holidays. We had seders at my grandparents' house. We fasted on Yom Kippur. We celebrated Hanukkah. Oh, we all knew, the 3 of us knew we were Jewish, but we never went to cheder and we never had bat mitzvahs. But we were all expected to marry Jewish men, and we all did. And never once in my childhood did we ever talk about the Holocaust. When Steve and I were first married, before we had children, we lived in Oklahoma City. Not a very strong Jewish environment. But instinctively, the first thing we did was join the synagogue there and remained members for the entire 5-year period that we lived in Oklahoma City. It brought us a new comfort that we didn't experience before. And when we moved to San Antonio in 1975, then having 2 young children, the same thing. We immediately joined Agudas Achim, and we joined the Jewish Community Center, because we wanted to have Jewish friends, and we wanted our children to have that Jewish connection as well. And what we knew we wanted that for our children, but after being members there for many years, about 14 years, there was talk actually of closing the synagogue after a 100-year history. In fact, in 1988, we had the centennial celebration for the synagogue, and it was an enormous success and a wonderful, happy event. But the synagogue was losing members. People were unhappy, and I was astounded to hear what people were talking about. I just couldn't believe it, and it was at that time that I jumped in with all my heart to try to change things. I tried to get people, I thought, let's get people motivated. Let's do something about it rather than accept defeat. Let's make this a happy house again. Well, once I made that decision, it turned into 5 years of near constant daily work, meetings, decision-making, phone calls, fundraising, and some struggles before the synagogue was finally relocated in a new location, which is now on the corner of Hebner's and Bitter, and it's quite a beautiful building, and the old location was sold. The rabbi at the time asked me, "Why did you do it? You weren't really even active at the time. You'd never done anything like this before." It was a very long and intense process, and I very often said, this is like having a full-time job. And I really didn't have a good answer for him. I struggled for a response, and I simply said, foolishly, "You don't close a synagogue." Well, it wasn't until my husband and I came to Chabad that I finally heard for myself what the right answer was, what was happening. It was a sermon that I was listening to that Rabbi Chaim Block was giving at the time about the Jewish soul. And I remember him saying that there's a spark that is in each one of us, inside each one of us. And it just needs something to ignite it. And I sat there saying to myself, that's what it was. It was that Jewish spark that had been ignited. My light had been turned on. My neshama had led me through that entire process. My neshama had felt challenged and it helped me get through. And I then discovered that deep connection that was sitting dormant in me, perhaps, for many years, a desire to be more connected to my Judaism, to my faith, to my belief in who I am, and in what we can accomplish, and in tikkun olam, in repairing the world, one by one. So I am a Jew, and I wanted more as a Jew. And being at Chabad has brought me more. It's brought me more peace, more awareness, the strongest spirituality I think I have ever experienced. And being at Chabad has made me want to be a better person. Being at Chabad has introduced me to some of the kindest and most caring people I've been fortunate to meet. It has inspired me to seek out kindness in others, appreciate charity for its inherent goodness, and led me to a greater appreciation of the qualities that my parents quietly instilled in all three of us. Yes, they were protecting us, but that they always guided us down the right path. And they would be very proud and happy to know that we are living a life full of Judaism and charity and peace. And not only are their children living this life, but their grandchildren are, and their great-grandchildren are as well. They are following in these very historic footsteps. And after all, isn't that what we all want?